The sound of her body hitting marble froze them all. He kicked her like she was nothing, never realizing the woman bleeding at his feet was now married to a man who doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and never acts without consequences. Old wounds reopened, dangerous attraction reignited, power shifted in silence as eyes watched and choices closed in. He thought he could walk away again, but some mistakes follow you forever. Was this the moment his past finally decided his future? Welcome to Afro Kdrama Stories Besties. Please like, share, and subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Zaraya didn't see the kick. She felt it. Hard, deliberate, and close enough that there was no time to brace. The impact drove into her ribs and folded her sideways into the glass display behind her. Ornaments shattered on contact, silver and red exploding outward as her shoulder struck metal and her body dropped to the marble floor. The sound cut through the Gangnam Mall sharply, not loud but final. The space stalled instead of erupting. Music kept playing. A child gasped. Someone laughed and stopped. Phones lifted halfway, uncertain whether this was entertainment or a mistake they'd regret recording. Zaraya tried to breathe and failed. Her chest burned like it had collapsed inward. Pain rippled through her side in sharp waves, stealing rhythm from her body. She shifted instinctively and felt fire tear through her elbow as skin split against the floor. Blood followed immediately, warm and fast, pooling beneath her arm against the white marble. A shadow settled over her. Caleb Wright looked down with irritation, not concern. His shoe nudged closer, stopping just short of her hand, as if she'd inconvenienced him by landing there. "Watch where you're going," he said, his voice clear, casual, loud enough for people nearby to hear. Her stomach dropped before her mind caught up. 3 years collapsed into a single second as recognition hit. The same voice that once spoke promises without substance. The same posture that assumed space belonged to him. The same man who had vanished with her savings, her apartment, and her future, while her body carried consequences he refused to acknowledge. Caleb tilted his head, studying her face. Confusion flickered first, then recognition, then something sharper. "Well," he drawled, crouching just enough to invade her space without touching her again, "if it isn't you." The circle around them tightened subtly. Shoppers pretended not to stare while staring anyway. Security lingered at a distance, watching posture and tone instead of stepping in. Power was being measured, and no one wanted to choose wrong. Zaraya planted her palm against the marble and pushed herself upright. Pain tore through her ribs hard enough to blur her vision, but she stood anyway. Staying down felt worse. Caleb's gaze tracked her slowly, assessing details he hadn't expected. The coat, the shoes, the way didn't apologize. His mouth tightened, then relaxed back into contempt. "Didn't think places like this were your scene," he said. "Guess you finally found someone willing to carry you." Her phone vibrated once inside her bag. Zaraya didn't look away from him as she answered. "Gangnam Mall," she said quietly. "Second floor." There was a pause on the line, then a voice stripped of warmth and explanation. "Are you hurt?" "Yes." "Do not move." The call ended. Caleb snorted. "Calling for help already?" She said nothing. The silence irritated him more than anger would have. He straightened, smoothing his jacket like the moment needed correction, not accountability. Behind him, security finally shifted their weight. Not forward, not back, waiting. Somewhere beneath the mall, engines turned over, low, controlled, deliberate. The sound didn't register consciously for most people. Zaraya felt it anyway, a pressure change she didn't fully understand. Yet, Caleb didn't hear it at all. He smiled, confident, unaware that the space around him had already begun to move without his permission. Caleb mistook the stillness for control. He stepped back half a pace, palms lifting briefly as if he were the reasonable one now, as if the moment could be reframed with posture alone. He wanted witnesses to remember restraint, not the impact that had sent her into glass. "Relax," he said, No need to make this bigger than it is." The word bigger carried a warning. Zariah stayed upright, forcing her breath into something steady. Her ribs protested with every inhale, a dull burn spreading beneath her coat. She kept her face neutral. Tears would feed him. Anger would entertain him. Silence gave him nothing. Caleb's smile thinned. "You always did love attention," he added louder this time. "Fall down, call someone, hope they come running." A few people shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the jewelry store looked away. Phones hovered at chest height, recording without commitment. Security lingered at the edge of the corridor, murmuring into radios without stepping in. They were watching Caleb's confidence, weighing it against hers. In places like this, power announced itself before it acted. Caleb glanced at them, reassured. "You okay?" he asked Zariah, mock concern slipping into his tone. "Need a medic? Or is this where you tell everyone I ruined your life again?" Her jaw tightened. "You're blocking the walkway," she said evenly. "Move." It wasn't what he expected. Caleb blinked, then laughed. "Still giving orders." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel private. "You should have stayed gone." Movement entered the space without urgency. Two men in plain suits appeared near Zariah, positioning themselves with quiet precision. One stood to her left, close enough to be felt but not seen as a shield. The other stopped behind Caleb, close enough that the distance vanished. Caleb turned, irritation flashing. "Hey!" Neither man answered him. "Sir," a security guard called out, cautious now, "we need to de-escalate." "For her?" Caleb scoffed, gesturing toward Zariah. "She tripped." The lie landed poorly. Too many eyes had seen the kick. Too many cameras were already rolling. Zariah's phone vibrated again. Outside the glass entrance, a black sedan rolled into the driveway against traffic. Its engine stayed on. Another pulled in behind it, then another. No horns, no rush, just presence. Caleb noticed the change in the air and frowned. "What is this?" he demanded. "What did you do?" Zariah met his gaze. "Nothing." The elevator chimed behind her. When the doors opened, the sound carried farther than it should have. Minjun stepped out alone. He didn't scan the crowd. He didn't acknowledge the phones or the guards or the tension thickening the corridor. He crossed to Zariah's side and stopped there, close enough that she felt him without being touched. His eyes moved once over her injuries, quick, precise. Then they settled on Caleb. "You struck my wife," Minjun said, not raised, not rushed, final. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. "Remove him," Minjun added. Hands closed on Caleb's arms. "This is a misunderstanding," Caleb shouted as panic cracked through his composure. "She's lying." Minjun turned his head slightly, just enough for Caleb to see his face fully. "You should have learned when to stop talking." Caleb was pulled backward, his protests dissolving into noise as the corridor cleared around him. Caleb's shoes scraped against the marble as the men tightened their grip. The sound cut thin and sharp through the corridor, louder than his voice, louder than the murmurs gathering behind the security line. "Let go of me," he snapped, twisting hard enough to draw a grunt from one of them. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The question came out on instinct. Status reflex. Years of believing his name carried weight everywhere. No one answered. The space around them changed with quiet efficiency. Store gates slid halfway down, not closed enough to cause panic, just enough to redirect foot traffic elsewhere. Security guards repositioned without comment, faces neutral, eyes deliberately unfocused. Phones vanished when people realized no one was stopping them from being taken. Caleb noticed that part too late. "This is illegal," he said, louder now. "You can't just—" Minjun didn't look at him. He stood beside Zariah, not touching her, not shielding her, simply occupying space in a way that made everything else adjust around him. His presence wasn't aggressive. It was procedural, as if what was happening had already been approved somewhere beyond the mall. Zariah felt the shift before she understood it. The air no longer belonged to the crowd. It no longer belonged to Caleb. It didn't even belong to her. It belonged to the man standing at her side. Caleb was forced down near the service corridor, his knee hitting the floor awkwardly. The motion stripped the last of his composure. Panic showed openly now, breathing uneven, jaw tight. "I didn't know," he said quickly, words tumbling over each other. "I swear I didn't know she was married." Minjun's gaze finally moved, not to Caleb's face, to the place where Caleb's foot had connected with Zoraya's ribs. "You knew enough to touch her," he said. Caleb shook his head, eyes darting. "She always exaggerates. She lies when she wants attention." Zoraya stepped forward. Pain flared instantly through her side, sharp enough to make her vision pulse, but she didn't stop. Standing still felt like permission. She refused to give it. "You left me pregnant," she said, her voice steady despite the burn in her chest. "You took my money, my apartment, my job, and today you thought you could still decide where I belong." Caleb opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Minjun moved then, stepping between them with deliberate calm. He didn't touch Caleb. He didn't raise his voice. He simply removed Zoraya from Caleb's line of sight completely. "This is where your understanding ends," Minjun said. "You don't get explanations." A man approached from the side, tablet already in hand. He spoke quietly, listing names, timestamps, recorded footage, prior incidents. Minjun listened without looking at him, then nodded once. "Take him." Caleb twisted hard, fear finally breaking through denial. "Zoraya," he called, voice cracking. "Tell him I didn't mean it." She didn't answer. She watched as he was pulled upright and turned away, his protests dissolving into noise as the corridor swallowed him piece by piece. The power he'd relied on his entire life evaporated in real time, leaving him exposed and small. Minjun turned to her. "Hospital first," he said. It wasn't a question. Zoraya met his gaze, cold, controlled, unreadable. "This doesn't end here," she said. "No," Minjun replied. "It escalates." As Caleb's voice vanished behind sealed doors, Zoraya felt the truth settle heavy in her chest. The mall returned to motion without returning to normal. Security reopened corridors selectively, guiding shoppers away from the service wing with practiced calm. Store gates lifted just enough to suggest continuity. Music resumed at the same volume it had always been, as if nothing worth remembering had occurred. But phones were gone. Not confiscated publicly, not demanded, simply absent. A quiet sweep had passed through the crowd, men and women in neutral attire collecting devices with polite insistence and no explanation. Those who resisted were given a look that made resistance feel unnecessary. Zoraya noticed. She sat on a low bench. Near the service hall, her coat folded carefully across her lap to hide the blood staining her sleeve. A medic knelt in front of her, working efficiently. Asking questions she answered in short, even sentences. She didn't look away from the corridor where Caleb had disappeared. The medic finished and stood. "We recommend observation," he said. "Ribs can—" "I know," she replied. He hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Minjun remained standing a few feet away, his posture unchanged, his attention divided between nothing and everything. He hadn't asked how she felt. He hadn't offered reassurance. He had simply stayed. A security supervisor approached, hands clasped too tightly in front of him. "We have the incident logged," the man said carefully. "Timestamps, camera angles, witness statements." Minjun didn't turn. "Good." "And the individual involved is contained," Minjun said. The supervisor swallowed. "Yes, sir." He hesitated again, then continued. "There is prior footage from other locations, similar behavior." Zoraya's gaze shifted. "Prior?" she asked. The supervisor looked at Minjun before answering. "Yes, ma'am." Minjun's eyes moved to her for the first time since the medic finished. "You didn't know," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," she replied. He nodded once, as if confirming a variable. Another man joined them, tablet in hand. He spoke quietly, efficiently, listing locations, dates, names, shopping centers, hotels, clubs, complaints dismissed, settlements buried, patterns that only emerged when someone finally bothered to connect them. Zariah listened without interrupting. This wasn't just about her. The realization settled heavy and unwelcome. "So this gets filed," she said. "And then what?" Minjun considered her for a moment. "Then it becomes permanent." The word landed differently than she expected. Permanent meant public record. It meant no reframing later, no denial that held, no story Caleb could tell that didn't run into documentation. She exhaled slowly. "That will follow him." "Yes," Minjun said, "everywhere." A pause stretched between them, thick with implications neither of them voiced. "People will know I'm connected to this," she said. "They already do," he replied. "What they don't know is why." The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. "We can delay external release," he offered. "Control the timing." Minjun shook his head. "No delays." The man nodded and stepped back, relief and fear crossing his face at once. Zariah closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. The pain in her ribs pulsed, steady and insistent, a reminder that this had started with a body on marble. "You're making him visible," she said. "Yes," Minjun replied. "Visibility is the cost." She looked up at him, then really looked. "And what's mine?" she asked. Minjun held her gaze. "That remains to be seen." Somewhere deeper in the building, a door closed with finality. Caleb walked out of the service corridor like a man released on a technicality. His jacket was straightened. His cuffs were aligned. The tremor in his hands had been mastered into something that passed for composure. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like he'd survived a misunderstanding and been sent on his way. That was the story he wanted remembered. Security flanked him without touching him, their presence close enough to signal consequence, but loose enough to suggest leniency. A supervisor murmured instructions into a radio, voice carefully neutral. The gates lifted a little more. Foot traffic resumed. The mall reclaimed its rhythm. Caleb noticed the looks, curious, speculative, unsure. He smiled for them. "See?" he said to no one in particular. "All good." Zariah watched from the bench, her coat still folded over her lap, her body stiff with the effort of staying still. Pain pulsed beneath her ribs in a steady beat, but she didn't move. Movement felt like concession. Caleb's gaze flicked to her and held for a fraction too long. "You should get that checked," he said, tone casual, as if concern were owed. "Wouldn't want you blaming me for something that was already broken." She didn't respond. Silence irritated him. It always had. He leaned slightly toward one of the guards. "So we're done here?" The guard didn't answer. He didn't need to. Caleb exhaled and took another step, then another. Each one loosened his shoulders. Each one fed the belief that this had limits. That power still worked if you pushed it confidently enough. Behind Zariah, Minjun spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Leave," he said. It wasn't directed at Caleb alone. It was procedural, final. Caleb paused, then turned, a thin smile returning. "Glad we could keep this civilized." Minjun didn't look at him. Caleb hesitated, waiting for more. When none came, he laughed softly under his breath and walked toward the exit, posture relaxed, already rewriting the incident into something survivable. Outside, the sedans remained idling. He didn't notice. Zariah shifted on the bench, wincing despite herself. Minjun's attention moved instantly, not to her face, but to the tension in her shoulders. "You should go to the hospital," he said. "I know." "Go," he repeated. She looked up at him. "You're letting him walk away." "For now," he replied. The phrase settled badly in her chest. "For now feels like permission," she said. Minjun met her gaze without flinching. "It is not." A pause stretched between them, filled with the noise of a mall pretending nothing had happened. "If I leave," she said carefully, "this becomes something done to me, not something I chose." Min-jun considered that. "Choice has cost," he said. "I'm aware." He nodded once. "Then choose." The weight of it pressed down on her harder than the pain. Safety offered, consequence delayed, control exchanged for time. Zoraya stood, slow and deliberate, every movement measured. "I'm not done," she said. Min-jun turned slightly, creating space instead of blocking her. "Then neither is he." Across the atrium, Caleb pushed through the glass doors into daylight, shoulders loose, convinced the worst had passed. He never looked back. Zoraya watched him go, knowing that the most dangerous moment wasn't the kick or the confrontation or the record being filed. It was the calm afterward. The hospital was quiet in the way expensive places always were, controlled, insulated, detached from urgency unless urgency arrived with influence. Zoraya sat on the edge of the examination bed, coat folded beside her, hands braced lightly against the thin paper sheet. The doctor spoke calmly, clinically, pointing to images on a screen that showed bruising blooming beneath her ribs. Nothing broken, nothing life-threatening, painful, but manageable. "Rest," the doctor said. "Observation overnight would be ideal." Zoraya nodded. "I'll manage." The doctor hesitated, then glanced toward the doorway before leaving the room without argument. Min-jun hadn't followed her inside. He stood just outside the glass wall, visible through the partition, posture relaxed in a way that made the hallway adjust around him. Staff passed him carefully. Conversations lowered when he turned his head. He hadn't raised his voice once since leaving the mall. That unsettled her more than anger would have. Zoraya slipped off the bed and crossed the room slowly, every step measured. The pain reminded her with each movement that her body was still catching up to what had happened. When she opened the door, Min-jun looked up immediately. "You should stay," he said. She shook her head. "I'm not a patient you can secure." His jaw tightened. Not anger, calculation. "This is not about control," he said. "It's about exposure." "Everything is exposure now," she replied. "You made sure of that." Min-jun studied her for a moment. "Caleb will not come near you again." "Because you won't allow it," she said. "Yes." "And if I walk out without protection?" He didn't answer immediately. "That's the question, isn't it?" she pressed. "Do I stay safe because I belong to you or because I choose to?" Min-jun held her gaze. "Those are not opposites. They are to me." Silence stretched between them, thin and deliberate. "I didn't ask for this," she said finally. "Not the attention, not the record, not the way people look at me now." "You were already being watched," he replied. "Today simply clarified by whom." She exhaled slowly. "You contained the situation." "For now." There it is again. Min-jun shifted slightly, just enough to signal the weight of what he was holding back. "Containment is not protection," he said. "It is delay. And what comes after the delay?" He met her eyes fully then. Consequence. The words sat heavy between them. Zoraya looked past him, down the corridor where two men waited without appearing to wait. The shape of her life had narrowed in ways she hadn't agreed to yet. "I'm going home," she said. Min-jun didn't block her path. He stepped aside instead, creating space without retreat. "Take the car," he said. "Take the driver." She paused. "And the rest?" "They will follow at a distance." "That's still containment." "Yes." Zoraya picked up her coat. Her ribs protested as she slipped it on, but she didn't slow. "I won't disappear quietly," she said. Min-jun inclined his head slightly. "I would never expect you to." As they moved down the corridor together, Zoraya understood something with uncomfortable clarity. The danger didn't announce itself. It followed her home. Zoraya noticed it first in the car, in the way the driver avoided the rear-view mirror, in the way the streetlights reflected off tinted windows that weren't hers. The city moved the same, but the space around her felt narrower, curated, as if her presence now required adjustment. By the time she stepped into the apartment, her ribs aching with each breath, she already felt watched, not by people, but by outcomes. She set her keys down carefully, as if sound itself carried consequence now. Her coat slipped from her shoulder and landed where it fell. She didn't pick it up. The pain in her side flared when she bent, reminding her that her body was still catching up to what her life had already absorbed. Her phone vibrated. She ignored it. Another vibration followed, then a third. She sat on the edge of the couch and finally turned. Wanged the screen over. A message from the school administrator she'd spoken to weeks earlier, the one who had sounded excited, decisive. "We're going to need to pause the contract discussion for now." Pause. Not no, not yes, just absence. Zoraya stared at the word until it lost shape. Her phone buzzed again. A different contact this time, a professional acquaintance she trusted. "Are you okay?" Yesterday was a lot. No question about her qualifications, no reassurance, just distance wrapped in concern. She set the phone face down. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise at the mall had been. No shouting, no confrontation, just space opening where certainty used to be. The door opened quietly. Minjun entered without ceremony, removing his jacket as he crossed the room. He looked at her once, taking in the tension in her shoulders, the way she sat too still, guarding her body. "They've started reacting," he said. She didn't ask who. "They're pulling back," she replied. "From me." "Yes." The confirmation tightened something in her chest. "You could stop this," she said. Minjun didn't hesitate. "I could." The honesty stung more than refusal would have. "And you're choosing not to," she said. "For now." The phrase landed like a weight she couldn't shift. She stood, ignoring the sharp protest in her ribs, and crossed the room slowly. "I was kicked in public," she said, "and somehow I'm the risk." "They are afraid," Minjun replied. "Fear looks for explanations." And they found one. He didn't contradict her. The silence stretched, deliberate and uncomfortable. "If you act," she said carefully, "this disappears." "Yes. And if you don't?" "It spreads." Zoraya closed her eyes briefly. Protection meant erasure of the problem, of nuance, of her voice. Resistance meant standing still while something she didn't control rewrote her life in. Quiet strokes. Her phone vibrated again. She turned the screen face down without looking. Zoraya didn't reach for it. She stayed where she was, standing near the window, ribs tight, watching a taxi slow at the curb below before moving on. The vibration stopped. Nothing followed. She let the silence sit. When she finally picked up the phone, there was no message, just a link, no name attached to it, no context offered. She opened it. The page loaded into an old forum thread, archived but intact. Her name sat halfway down the screen, unmistakable. The words beneath it were hers, angry, raw, written during nights when she'd slept in her car and survival had mattered more than tone. Nothing had been changed. Nothing had been added. It had simply been brought forward. She scrolled. Screenshots were already circulating. Comments layered over her sentences, tightening them into something sharp and unstable. Familiar phrases now read like evidence instead of memory. Footsteps sounded behind her. Minjun crossed the room and stopped when he saw her face. He didn't ask what it was. He already knew. "This wasn't random," she said. "No." He didn't make it. No. He waited. Minjun's expression didn't shift. Waiting creates timing. Zoraya exhaled slowly, pressing her palm against her ribs as the ache sharpened. "He knows what to release," she said. "And when." "Yes. If you act," she said, "this disappears." Minjun paused. "If I act, the framing changes." "To what?" To control, he said, to suppression. And if you don't? He didn't answer immediately. Zariah refreshed the page, more comments. A different site had picked it up, phrasing it as background. Another account had linked it back to the mall incident, careful with language, generous with implication. She locked the phone and set it down. The knock came before either of them spoke again. Not loud, not urgent, just firm. Zariah moved first. She crossed the room slowly and opened the door. A woman stood there, professional smile in place, eyes already scanning past Zariah's shoulder. "I'm with the building committee," she said. "Just a quick check-in." "About what?" Zariah asked. "Recent activity," the woman replied. There were some concerns raised. "Concerns?" Zariah repeated. "Yes, about security, attention, the kind of situations that bring visibility." Zariah glanced down the hall. A door across the corridor stood slightly open. Someone was listening. "I was assaulted," she said evenly. "Of course," the woman replied quickly. "No one is disputing that. We just need to review a few things. Guest access, parking, protocol." "Are you asking me to leave?" Zariah asked. The smile tightened. "Not at this time." When the door closed, the hallway felt narrower. Min Jun stood behind her now. "They moved. Fast," she said. "Yes." "You could stop this." "Yes." She turned to face him. "And if you don't?" Before he could answer, a door down the hall opened. Someone stepped out and didn't go anywhere. The door across the hall closed slowly, not slammed, not hurried, closed with intention. Zariah didn't look away from it. She felt Min Jun shift behind her, felt the room adjust again around his presence. The building committee woman had already left, her concern neatly delivered and withdrawn, but the effect remained. Doors opening, doors closing, people recalibrating where they stood. "This timing," Zariah said quietly, "isn't coincidence." "No," Min Jun replied. "He's careful." She turned to face him, careful enough to stay clean. "Yes, and loud enough that I'm the one who looks unstable." Min Jun didn't correct her. The truth sat between them. Caleb hadn't raised a hand, hadn't spoken publicly, hadn't shown his face. He'd done something worse. He'd set events in motion and let the room do the rest. Zariah walked back into the apartment, ignoring the ache in her ribs. She didn't sit. Sitting felt like waiting. "You said if you act," she began, "the framing changes." "Yes, to control," she said, "to suppression. And to ownership," Min Jun added. She stopped. "Say that again." "If I move against him now," Min Jun said, voice even, "the narrative becomes simple. Powerful man silences critic, erases past, protects his wife at any cost. And Caleb walks away clean. For now," Min Jun said. Zariah exhaled sharply. "That's exactly what he wants." "Yes." She paced once, then stopped. "He knows you're stronger." "Yes." "He knows you can erase him." "Yes." "So he's daring you to do it." Min Jun watched her carefully. "He is daring me to act first." Silence stretched, taut, and uncomfortable. "And if you don't?" she asked. "Then he continues," Min Jun said, slowly, indirectly, in places that look like coincidence. Zariah leaned against the counter, the cool surface grounding her. "He's not trying to destroy me," she said. "He's trying to make me choose." Min Jun nodded once. "Between safety and credibility. Between disappearing the problem and becoming it." She closed her eyes briefly. Images flickered, emails postponed, doors half opened, the way concern had been used as distance. None of it illegal, none of it dramatic, all of it effective. "This is because he waited," she said, "because he didn't touch me again." "Yes." Her jaw tightened. "He learned." "Yes." Min Jun took a step closer, not reaching for her. "I can end this tonight." She opened her eyes. "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he said, "you are protected and framed." He didn't deny it. Zariah straightened, decision forming under pressure rather than clarity. "No," she said, "not yet." Minjun searched her face. "You're choosing delay." "I'm choosing not to give him what he wants," she replied. "Not this way." A pause. "Caleb believes you'll move," she added. "He's counting on it." Minjun's expression hardened, not with anger, but with restraint. "Then we disappoint him." Down the hall, a door opened again. Someone stepped out, glanced toward Zariah's apartment, then retreated without a word. Zariah watched the door close. "He's still moving the room," she said. "Yes," Minjun replied, "and he hasn't even spoken." An email arrived while she was still standing. No greeting, no apology. Just a subject line that didn't soften what followed. "Update on your position." Zariah read it once, then again. The wording was careful. Temporary suspension, administrative review, optics, nothing accusatory. Nothing she could challenge without proving the very instability they were implying. She felt Minjun move closer behind her. He didn't touch her. "This came fast," she said. "Yes," he replied, "because it was prepared." Caleb's timing, not luck. She scrolled. A paragraph near the bottom offered reassurance. "We value your contributions." Another offered distance, until further notice. Zariah set the phone down without replying. Across the street, a delivery truck idled longer than necessary. Someone leaned out of the passenger window, glanced up, then looked away. It wasn't surveillance. It was awareness. The kind that spreads when a story is easier to believe than to verify. "They're protecting themselves," she said. "They're protecting the narrative," Minjun corrected. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "He didn't have to lie." "No," Minjun said. "He only had to remind them who you used to be." The room felt smaller again, not from presence but from subtraction. Options narrowing, paths closing quietly. "If you act now," she said, "this disappears." "Yes, and everything else with it." Minjun didn't argue. She turned to him. "He's forcing a permanent choice." "Yes?" "Because if you step in," she continued, "what they'll remember isn't what he did. It's who you are. And who you belong to," Minjun added. A knock sounded down the hall. Not at her door. Someone else's. A neighbor answered. Voices lowered. Then the door closed. Zariah watched the exchange through the peephole without opening her own. "He's not attacking," she said. "He's letting gravity work." Minjun nodded. "He's patient." She picked up the phone again, opened the email, and forwarded it to herself. Not to respond, to keep. Evidence wasn't protection, but it was memory. "What if I say nothing?" she asked. "Then the silence fills itself," Minjun said, "with assumptions. And if I fight it, then the fight becomes the story." Zariah exhaled through her nose, steadying herself against the counter. The ache in her ribs flared as if to remind her this was real, not theoretical. "This is the cost you warned me about," she said. "Yes." "Is it over?" Minjun looked past her, toward the window, toward the street. "No," he said. "This is the point he wanted to reach." Her phone buzzed once more. Another message, another careful postponement, another quiet subtraction. Zariah didn't answer it. She stepped away from the counter, posture straightening despite the pain. Control hadn't vanished. It had been reduced. Caleb hadn't needed to win. He'd only needed to make sure something couldn't be put back. The call came from someone who didn't owe her anything. Zariah was standing at the sink when she heard Minjun answer his phone behind her, his voice, low, clipped. She didn't turn around. She already knew this wasn't personal. That was the point. He ended the call without comment. "Another?" she asked. "Yes." She dried her hands slowly, the ache in her ribs still there, less sharp now but deeper. "About me." "Yes." "Not from Caleb. Because of him." Minjun didn't move closer. He stayed where he was, letting the distance exist. He understood now that proximity itself had become charged. "They're coordinating," she said. "They're comparing notes," he replied, deciding how careful to be. Zariah leaned her hip against the counter. He didn't ask them to do anything. No. He didn't threaten. No. He just made sure they remembered. Yes. The pattern was clear now. Caleb wasn't reaching forward. He was pulling threads backward, drawing attention to versions of her that no longer existed, but were easier to explain than what she'd become. Her phone chimed on the table. Not a message. A calendar notification disappearing. She picked it up, checked the details, then set it back down. Another meeting removed without discussion. Another quiet subtraction. "This is fixation," she said. Minjun nodded. "He's watching what lands." "And adjusting." "Yes." Zariah crossed the room, stopping near the window. Across the street, the delivery truck from earlier was gone. Something else sat in its place. Not the same car, not the same people, just presence shifting, like attention moving from one surface to another. "He's not trying to hurt me," she said. "He's trying to make sure I feel it." Minjun's jaw tightened. "He wants you to act." She laughed once, without humor. "He wants you to act, yes. If you do," she said, "this turns into a spectacle." "And he disappears into it," Minjun replied. Silence stretched. Zariah felt the weight of the day settle in her shoulders. This wasn't exhaustion from fear. It was exhaustion from being considered. "They're deciding who I am without asking me," she said. "They're deciding who you cost them to stand beside," Minjun corrected. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "How long does this go on?" Minjun didn't answer immediately. "As long as he's convinced he's invisible. And when he stops believing that, then he moves," Minjun said. "Openly." Zariah turned back to him. "So we let him wait." "Yes. Even if I lose more." Minjun met her gaze. "Especially if you lose more." The truth of it settled heavily between them. This wasn't about winning quickly. It was about refusing to blink first. Her phone chimed again. Another polite cancellation, another absence disguised as professionalism. Zariah silenced it and set it face down. Caleb still hadn't spoken to her, still hadn't appeared, still hadn't reached out. And somehow he was everywhere. She straightened, the decision not spoken but felt. "Let him keep waiting," she said. Minjun inclined his head slightly. "He will." Outside, the streetlight flickered and steadied. Nothing exploded. Nothing resolved. The pressure simply stayed. Stay with the story because it only gets better. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The first change wasn't loud enough to announce itself. Zariah noticed it because Minjun stopped standing still. He crossed the apartment without speaking, picked up his phone, and made a call he didn't bother lowering his voice for. Not angry, not rushed, precise. "I want timelines," he said, "not opinions." She watched him from where she stood, ribs still aching, senses sharpened by repetition. This wasn't the man from the mall. This wasn't restraint. This was preparation. He ended the call and immediately made another. "Yes," he said, everyone quietly. Zariah didn't interrupt. By the third call, she understood what had changed. Minjun wasn't reacting to Caleb anymore. He was repositioning the field. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Removing noise," he replied. "From who?" "From you." She folded her arms, wincing slightly. "And adding it where?" Minjun met her gaze. "Where he can't control it." The phone buzzed in his hand. He answered without greeting. "No," he said, "not yet. Let them speak first." He listened, expression unreadable, then ended the call. Zariah felt it before she saw it. The shift, the quiet rebalancing. This wasn't a counterattack. It was interference. Across the room, her laptop chimed. She opened it. An email, unprompted, unexpected. "We'd like to revisit our earlier pause." She didn't smile. Another notification followed, then another. Not confirmations. Not apologies, just reopened doors that had closed too cleanly to feel natural. "They're moving back," she said. "Yes," Minjun replied, "but not all the way." "No." She turned to him. "You're pressuring the space around him." "I'm reminding them," he said, "that hesitation has consequences too." "And him?" Minjun didn't answer immediately. "He's watching," she said. "Yes." "And he'll adjust." "Yes." Zaraya felt a strange tension coil in her chest. This wasn't relief. This was escalation without explosion. "You're making him uncomfortable," she said. "I'm making him impatient," Minjun corrected. Her phone rang. Not Caleb. Someone else. A former colleague. Careful voice. Too careful. "I just wanted to check in," the woman said. "There are conversations happening. I thought you should know." Zaraya listened, said nothing. When the call ended, she looked at Minjun. "He's still talking." "Yes." "But now," she added, "so are you." Minjun's expression sharpened. "Not yet," he said. "I'm letting him hear echoes." She exhaled slowly. "This doesn't end him." "No," Minjun agreed. "It teaches him." Outside, a car pulled up and didn't idle long. Somewhere else in the city, someone recalculated. Caleb still hadn't shown his face, still hadn't spoken, but the silence around his name had changed. Zaraya felt it settle, tight, coiled, unstable. "Now," he said, "we see how much patience he actually has." Minjun was already on the phone. He crossed the apartment without slowing, jacket half on, voice low but moving fast. "Pause everything," he said. "Not cancel. Pause." Zaraya stayed where she was, fingers still on the edge of the counter. Her ribs pulled tight as she shifted her weight. The apartment felt smaller only because Minjun was using it like a corridor. "I said quietly," he continued. "No emails yet." He ended the call and immediately made another. "Yes, I'm aware." A pause. "No, let it sit." He hung up and finally looked at her. Her laptop chimed. Zaraya turned as the screen changed, the document she'd been working on replaced by a neutral notice. "Access temporarily restricted. Please contact administration." She didn't react. "That's not him," she said. Minjun nodded once. "No. That's because of you." "Yes." She closed the laptop, slow and deliberate. "You pushed too close." "I redirected," he replied. "Someone else moved first." Her phone rang before she could answer. She recognized the number and picked it up. "They're uncomfortable," the voice said. "Things are shifting faster than expected." Zaraya leaned her hip against the counter. "So they froze. For now, they don't want to be seen choosing sides." The call ended. Another email landed, then another, not hostile, not supportive. Neutral language, delays, reconsiderations. Minjun watched her read, without commenting. "He didn't ask for this," she said. "No," Minjun replied. "He anticipated it." "And you gave it room." "Yes." Zaraya set the phone down and walked past him, opening the apartment door just enough to look into the hallway. A neighbor across the hall pretended to adjust their shoes and didn't look up. Someone else's door closed softly. She shut the door again. "They're watching," she said. "They're deciding," Minjun corrected. His phone buzzed. He read the message, then turned the screen toward her. A single line. He hasn't spoken. Zaraya exhaled once. "That's deliberate." "Yes." "If he stays silent," she said, "everything happening looks natural." "And if I speak," Minjun added, "it doesn't." Another notification sounded from her laptop. Access restored, limited, conditional. "They're pulling back and forward," she said. "Testing," Minjun replied. She turned to him. "If you move again, they'll say this only stabilizes when you intervene." "And if I don't," he said, "he keeps tightening it." Zaraya nodded. "Then let him." Minjun studied her for a moment, then reached for his keys. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To make sure nothing else moves," he said. "And if something does?" He paused with his hand on the door. Then he'll think it's because of him. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Zariah watched it close. The lock clicked. Her phone lit up again. A missed call. Unknown number. She set it face down. Outside, a car pulled away from the curb. Another took its place. Min Jun didn't take the elevator. Zariah heard his footsteps on the stairs through the thin wall by the door, measured and unhurried, fading one level at a time. She stayed where she was until the sound was gone, then crossed the apartment and checked the lock again. It was secure. That didn't change anything. Her laptop chimed. She moved back to the counter and opened it. The restricted notice was gone, replaced by a short reply to the thread she'd sent earlier. Not approval, not denial, a request for documentation that had already been submitted once. She scrolled. The timestamp was recent. Someone was awake. Her phone rang. A local number. She answered without speaking. "We need clarification," a man said, "about your availability." "For what?" she asked. "A review meeting," he replied. "It was postponed. We're trying to reschedule." "Who's attending?" Zariah asked. A pause. Papers shifting. "That hasn't been finalized." "Then I'm not available," she said and ended the call. Another message arrived immediately after. A different sender, different tone, same request. She didn't answer. The hallway camera on her phone refreshed. Nothing unusual. The feed lagged, then caught up. Someone stepped out 2 doors down, checked their phone, and went back inside. Zariah set her phone on the counter and opened the cabinet beneath it, pulling out the folder she'd kept untouched since moving in. Old documents, copies, dates that mattered because they were hard to revise. She flipped to the back and slid one page free. Her doorbell rang. She froze, then crossed the apartment and checked the peephole. A uniform, building security. She opened the door part way. "We're updating access logs," the guard said. Eyes polite, posture neutral. There were some discrepancies. "Whose?" Zariah asked. "General," he replied. "We're just confirming entries." She handed him her phone without comment. He scanned the screen, nodded, and handed it back. "Everything checks out," he said. "Thank you." As he turned away, another guard appeared at the end of the hall, glanced toward Zariah's door, then looked down at his clipboard. The door closed. Zariah went back to the counter and opened her laptop again. Another reply had landed, this one longer. Cautious language, conditional phrasing. She forwarded it to Min Jun without comment. The reply came back almost immediately. Hold. She didn't ask what that meant. Her phone buzzed. Text this time. Unknown number. You're making this harder than it needs to be. She stared at the message, then typed a single word and deleted it before sending. She locked the screen instead and set the phone down. Outside, tires rolled over gravel. A car door shut. Footsteps crossed the sidewalk and stopped. Her laptop chimed again. The meeting request was gone, replaced by a new thread. "We'll proceed after further review." She closed the laptop. The hallway camera refreshed once more. The second guard had moved closer, not to her door, just close enough to be visible. Zariah leaned against the counter, steadying herself as the ache in her ribs returned, dull but insistent. She didn't sit. Her phone buzzed. Again. This time, a name appeared. Caleb. She didn't answer. The call stopped. Then came again. She picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and set it back down without responding. Outside, the car pulled away. The guard checked his watch. Zariah stayed where she was. The phone didn't ring again. Zariah waited through the silence anyway, standing at the counter with both hands braced against the stone. The hallway camera refreshed once more. The guard closest to her door stepped back into the stairwell and disappeared from view. Her phone vibrated. Email this time. She opened it. The subject line was shorter than the others. No qualifiers. No cushioning. Formal notice. She scrolled without sitting. The language was careful, not accusatory, not defensive. A shift in role designation. Temporary reassignment pending review, effective immediately. She reached the end and didn't scroll back. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Min Jun. "Where are you?" she asked when she answered. "2 blocks away," he said. "Don't open the door." "I'm not." A pause on the line. Traffic noise cut in and out. "He called you." "Yes." "Did you answer?" "No." Another pause. Longer. "Good." She forwarded the notice to him. He didn't respond right away. Her laptop chimed. A calendar invitation appeared, already accepted on her behalf. The meeting time had been moved up. Tonight. Zoraya deleted it without opening. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She didn't pick up. "This is him," she said. "Yes," Min Jun replied. "He's compressing the timeline." "Yes," she exhaled slowly. "He wants me to choose without room." "And to do it where people can see," Min Jun added. The elevator down the hall dinged. Doors opened, closed. Footsteps crossed the lobby camera view and vanished. Zoraya walked to the window and checked the street. The car from earlier was gone. Another had taken its place. Engine running, hazard lights off. Her phone vibrated again. This time, a voicemail notification appeared. She didn't play it. "Tell me what you're willing to lose," Min Jun said quietly. Zoraya didn't answer immediately. She crossed the apartment and opened the drawer beside the sink, pulling out the folder she'd used earlier. She flipped through it again, stopped at a page, and slid it free. "I can lose the position," she said. "I can't lose control of the record." "Then we protect the record," Min Jun replied. "And if that costs you leverage, then I accept that cost." The car outside rolled forward a few feet and stopped again. Zoraya set the paper on the counter and took a photo of it, then another, then sent both to Min Jun. Her phone buzzed immediately. Received. Another buzz followed. He's watching the response window. She looked back at the notice on her laptop, then closed it without replying. The voicemail notification disappeared, replaced by a text. "You don't have to do this the hard way." Zoraya typed nothing. She locked the screen and turned the phone face down. The elevator dinged again. This time, it didn't open. Min Jun's voice came through the line, steady but no longer distant. "I'm downstairs." "I know," she said. "Stay where you are." She didn't move. Outside, the car shut off its engine. A door opened. Someone waited. Zoraya stayed where she was, phone face down on the counter, eyes fixed on the hallway camera. The feed didn't glitch. It didn't lag. The frame showed the elevator doors, closed and still. Her phone vibrated once. She didn't touch it. Min Jun's voice came through the line again, lower this time, closer. "I'm at the door." She crossed the apartment and unlocked it. Min Jun stepped inside and closed the door behind him without looking down the hall. His jacket was already buttoned. He checked the lock himself, then set her phone on the counter and switched it to speaker. The call came through immediately. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're forcing this." Min Jun didn't respond. "I waited," Caleb said. "I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten her. I gave her room." Min Jun adjusted the phone's position so it lay flat between them. "You displaced her," he said. "You timed it." A breath. Footsteps in the background. A door opening somewhere Caleb was. "You don't want this," Caleb said. "If this moves, it doesn't stop where you think it does." Min Jun looked at Zoraya, not asking, checking alignment. She didn't speak. She stepped forward and pushed the phone farther onto the counter, leaving it there. Min Jun spoke once. "Now." The line went dead. Outside, the hallway camera refreshed. The elevator doors slid open. 2 men stepped out. Not the ones from before. These didn't. Hesitate. One checked the stairwell. The other pressed the call button again. Min Jun reached for his keys. "You don't need to go," Zoraya said. "I do," he replied. He opened the door and stepped into the hall. The men fell in behind him without a word. The elevator doors closed. Zoraya didn't follow. She went to the window instead. The car outside rolled forward as the elevator descended. Not fast, controlled. Another vehicle pulled out from behind it and followed at a distance. Minutes passed. Not many. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "He tried to stall," the voice said. "Asked for time." Zariah closed her eyes once. "Is it finished?" "Yes." The call ended. Outside, the cars turned the corner and disappeared. Traffic filled the space they left. A pedestrian crossed without looking up. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Min-jun stepped out alone. His jacket was still buttoned. He crossed the apartment, went to the sink, and washed his hands slowly. When he finished, he dried them and looked at her. "He won't be timing anything again," he said. Zariah nodded. The hallway camera refreshed. Empty. Min-jun didn't sit. He stood by the counter, hands still damp, jacket still buttoned, eyes tracking the hallway camera as it refreshed again. Empty. The screen held steady this time. Zariah picked up her phone and unlocked it. No missed calls, no new messages. The thread that had been pressing her all day was quiet. Not resolved. Quiet. She set the phone back down. "Did anyone see you?" she asked. "Yes," Min-jun replied. "Do they know why?" "No." A notification appeared on her laptop. She opened it without moving the screen toward him. The subject line was careful. Review logistics. The body was shorter than before, one sentence, a new time, a new room. She deleted it. Min-jun watched her do it. "They'll follow up." "They already have," she said, and forwarded him a screenshot of a different message that had come in moments earlier. Same request, different sender. The language wasn't neutral anymore. It was accommodating. Min-jun read it and set his phone down. "They're recalibrating." She nodded. Without him. The hallway camera flickered. Still nothing. A door down the hall opened and closed too quickly to see who moved through it. Zariah crossed the apartment and opened the drawer beneath the sink. She slid the folder out, removed the page she'd set aside earlier, and placed it on the counter. Not dramatic, just present. Min-jun glanced at it. "You won't need that now." "I didn't need it before either," she said. "That wasn't the point." He didn't argue. Her phone buzzed once. Email. She opened it. A withdrawal. Polite. Immediate. No explanation offered. No follow-up scheduled. She didn't respond. Another email arrived seconds later. Confirmation of access restored. Full. Unconditional. Min-jun exhaled through his nose. "They're moving fast." "They always do," she said. "Once the risk changes." Outside, a siren passed and faded. Traffic resumed its rhythm. The street below didn't mark anything as missing. Min-jun reached for his phone, stopped, then set it back down untouched. "I crossed a line," he said. "Yes," Zariah replied. "And you didn't stop me." "No." A pause. Not heavy, measured. "Will that be a problem?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not tonight." The hallway camera refreshed again. Empty. The feed held. Zariah leaned against the counter, feeling the ache in her ribs settle into something dull and manageable. She didn't sit. Her phone vibrated, this time a voicemail notification. She opened it, listened without expression, then deleted it. "What did it say?" Min-jun asked. "Nothing that matters anymore," she said. The laptop chimed. A calendar entry disappeared on its own. Another followed. The quiet wasn't clean, but it was directional. Min-jun finally unbuttoned his jacket and set it over the chair without sitting. "There will be questions." "Yes." "And distance," he added. "Yes." He met her eyes. "And consequences." She nodded once. "That's already paid." The hallway camera refreshed. Still empty. Zariah turned the screen off. Min-jun didn't stay. He stepped out again before the hallway camera could refresh a second time, jacket back on, phone already in his hand. Zariah didn't ask where he was going. She already knew it wasn't about finishing anything. The door closed. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. She ignored it and opened the cabinet beneath the sink, returning the folder to its place. The drawer slid shut without sound. She straightened slowly, ribs protesting, then crossed the apartment and checked the lock again. The hallway camera flickered. Someone stood there. Not a guard. Not one of Min Jun's men. A woman she didn't recognize waited near the elevator, phone held loosely at her side. She wasn't looking at the door. She was looking at the camera. Zoraya stayed still. The woman raised her phone and spoke into it, eyes never leaving the lens. A few seconds later, she turned and walked into the stairwell. Zoraya picked up her phone. Min Jun answered on the second ring. "Don't open the door." "I'm not," she said. "Someone was just here." A pause. Not long. "Describe her." Zoraya did. Height, hair, how she stood, how she didn't hurry. Another pause. "That's not mine," Min Jun said. Zoraya didn't respond. "I told them not to cross the threshold," he added. "You don't control that anymore," she said. Silence. Her laptop chimed. She opened it. A message had been forwarded into her inbox without explanation. No sender listed. Just a file name and a timestamp that predated the mall incident by years. She didn't open it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Min Jun. "I broke a line I said I wouldn't." She typed nothing. Another message followed. "It didn't help you." She locked the screen and set the phone down. Outside, the streetlight across from her window flickered, steadied, then flickered again. The camera refreshed. The hallway was empty. Her phone rang. Not Min Jun, not unknown. A saved contact she hadn't heard from in years. She answered. "They came to me," the voice said. "Asked questions they shouldn't have known how to ask." Zoraya leaned her shoulder against the wall. "Did you answer?" "I told them I didn't know you anymore," the voice replied. "I don't know if that was the right thing." Zoraya closed her eyes once. It was. The call ended. Her phone buzzed again. Min Jun this time. "I failed to keep something contained," he said. Not him, something older. Zoraya looked back at the unopened file. On her laptop. "I know," she said. The elevator dinged, doors opened, footsteps stepped out, then stopped. Someone waited. Zoraya didn't move toward the door. She watched the hallway camera instead as the figure outside shifted their weight and stepped back, just enough to disappear from the frame. Her phone buzzed. Min Jun. She answered without speaking. "Don't open it," he said. "I'm not." "They crossed a boundary I didn't authorize," he continued. "That doesn't reverse what happened." "I know." A pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "In the apartment." "Stay there." The call ended. Zoraya crossed to the counter and opened her laptop. The forwarded file was still there. She didn't click it. She forwarded it to a private address she'd created earlier and closed the computer without saving anything else. Her phone buzzed again. Email this time. A reply to a message she hadn't sent yet. "Understood. Will proceed in room C." She didn't ask how they knew. The hallway camera refreshed. Empty. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. Footsteps crossed into view and stopped. A man leaned into frame, checked the floor number, and stepped back out again. The doors closed. Zoraya felt the ache in her ribs sharpen, then settle. She picked up the folder from the drawer and removed 2 pages. Not the first ones, the last. She folded them once and slipped them into her bag. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered. "You changed the order," the voice said. Not accusing, observational. "Yes," Zoraya replied. "That wasn't expected." "No." A breath on the other end. "You know this doesn't end the questions." "I know. And you know why they're asking." "Yes." Silence. "We'll adjust," the voice said finally, "but this limits what can be reopened." "That was the intention," Zoraya replied. The line disconnected. Her phone rang again immediately. Min Jun. "They're moving," he said. "Not cleanly." "Neither are we," she replied. Another elevator dinged down the hall. This time the doors stayed open longer. Voices overlapped. A cart rolled past the camera and out of frame. They're consolidating, Minjun said. It won't stay quiet. I don't need it to, Zoraya replied. I need it contained. A pause. You understand what this costs, Minjun said. Yes. And you're choosing it anyway. Yes. The hallway camera refreshed. The space outside her door was empty again. Her phone buzzed once more. Calendar update. Final review. Location confirmed. She accepted it. Minjun exhaled on the line. You're committing. I already did, she said. The call ended. Zoraya set her phone face down, adjusted the strap of her bag, and stood where she was as the apartment settled around her. Outside, a car pulled up and shut off its engine. Another arrived behind it. Zoraya didn't rush. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took one last look at the apartment, not to remember it, but to register that it would no longer hold anything unfinished. She opened the door. Minjun stood there alone. No guards. No jacket this time. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms, hands empty, posture relaxed in a way that didn't pretend the night had been simple. It's done, he said. She stepped past him into the hallway and closed the door herself. The lock engaged. Final. They walked without speaking. The elevator doors opened as they reached them, as if timed for them alone. When the doors closed, Minjun finally looked at her properly, his gaze dropping to the faint bruise still visible beneath her sleeve. You didn't flinch, he said. I wasn't going to, she replied. The elevator descended. No interruptions, no stops. When the doors opened, again the lobby was empty. The car outside waited with its engine running, lights low. Minjun opened the door for her and followed her in. They didn't go far. A quiet stretch of road. A place without cameras angled too carefully. The car stopped, engine cut. Minjun turned toward her fully now. They'll move on, he said, not because they're satisfied, because there's nothing left to leverage. And him? Zoraya asked. He's finished, Minjun replied, in every way that matters. She nodded once. That was enough. Silence filled the space between them, not tense, not empty, earned. Minjun reached out, hesitated, then rested his hand lightly at her waist. Not possession, not protection, presence. You didn't ask me to stop, he said quietly. I didn't need to, she replied. I asked you to finish. His thumb brushed her side, careful of the injury. You chose the end. Yes. And you stayed, he added. Yes. For the first time that night, his composure shifted, not cracking, relaxing. He leaned closer, forehead touching hers, breath warm against her skin. I would have burned the world for you, he said. I know, Zoraya replied. That's why I didn't let you. A small smile tugged at his mouth. You're dangerous. She tilted her head slightly. You married me. That did it. Minjun closed the distance and kissed her. Not rushed, not desperate. Slow, deliberate, grounding. One hand at her waist, the other lifting to cradle the back of her head, as if anchoring something that had been unstable for too long. She kissed him back just as steadily, fingers curling into his sleeve, feeling the tension leave him in increments. No urgency, no fear, just certainty. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers again. It's really over, he said. Yes, she replied. And it doesn't get to follow us. He nodded once. The car door opened. The driver waited without looking back. Minjun stepped out first, then offered his hand. Zoraya took it. As they drove away, the city behind them continued exactly as it always had. Lights changing, people crossing streets, doors opening and closing for reasons that had nothing to do with them. Caleb wasn't part of that anymore. He never would be. Zoraya leaned into Minjun's side, his arms settling around her shoulders without tightening, without guarding. For the first time in a long while, nothing waited,